hardest kind of boss to have, period. It also hurts if even if they're not the boss, if it's just someone that's in the organization. This is really one of those things that can be really leading to some real issues, both professionally, emotionally, and on your career trajectory, right? So what's interesting though is that these are also known as kind of narcissistic boss, in some literature, the sociopathic boss. If you've never read the book Snakes in Suits, man, I tell you, you got to go read that book. It is one of the most interesting books about how to deal with a narcissistic or boss that's just simply so self-absorbed that only they matter. Now, what's interesting though is that these people often thrive in certain kinds of companies, right? So you'll find a more prevalent of them in different kinds of companies. But overall, in a company, they tend to underperform by about 12%. So technically, they're losing the company money, but until the company realizes that, the company won't do anything until the employee gets too expensive to be continue to be hired or to be working there. Now, again, this works as long as there's a big reward, but there's some things that can fall apart really quickly. And if you've never heard of the dark triad, that's another one. And we're going to kind of go over that. So the self-absorbed boss, again, narcissistic boss, completely self-absorbed, not worried, only in it for themselves. And again, it's a really interesting kind of thing when you get in here because I've had this boss just once, and we'll talk about that. Now, the dark triad is really kind of interesting because if you tie all three of these together, it becomes really interesting. And you will see this at the senior executive level, right? So the dark triad is narcissism, Machiavellism, and psychopathy, right? They're in it for themselves. They will pit people against each other to get what they want. And they literally do not care about the rules of society. The rules don't apply to them. And it really does. You see this in corporate scandals. You see this in Enron. You see this in other kinds of companies. You see this in certain companies like big banks that cannot change their company culture because their company culture is steeped in this process, right? And these are really going to show up when you get into people like Andrew Fastow, the CFO from Enron. Enron provided us a really big viewpoint into how can this kind of leadership really just tear apart a company and like really fast. And what's interesting is if you take a look on some of the samples that they've done to try to figure out how many managers are in here, about 8% of the managers you will ever meet fall into this dark triad symptomatic process. So 8%. And again, of all the managers I've only had one. And the sad part is I've had one, right? And we'll kind of go into what that one was like in a little bit because this is a really dark place, right? Now, this is where you matter. This is where what you want and your copingisms really matter. Because as long as you do what you need to do or you're seen as an asset by this kind of manager, your life is basically going to be fine. If you're a go along, get along kind of person, then this manager doesn't really hurt you until they decide you're the one that they need to pick on, right? But if anything changes, political landscape, social landscape, the boss just came in a bad mood, things can get really ugly really fast. And I mean really ugly really fast. And they will gaslight you. They will say, well, why didn't you do this, right? And there simply may not be enough time to react, right? That flight or fight that you have, what we all have, is going to kick in, and you really have to stomp down on that because you're in work. And they're going to expect you to be professional. And that person's going to come in and try to get you to behave in an unprofessional manner so they can either get rid of you or get leverage over you, right? So there are some survival traits, right? But the real big one is that you need to be working on your exit plan because there is no happy ending here, right? And you need to move a lot faster than the company will. And that's just that simple point of this. If you are a normal person, this is the kind of person that will literally beat you down to get what they want, and they don't care what happens to you, right? It's sad, right? Now, there are some really big traits on this one because not everybody is, and sometimes it's really just a weird kind of thing. Maybe they exhibit some of the traits, but not all of them. So here's some ones. So it's really difficult to maintain realistic goals and maintain healthy relationships with this kind of manager. So if your manager keeps on shifting the ground on you, keeps on moving the goalpost, okay, that's a trait, right? If they can't maintain a healthy relationship, if they're always talking to you or to the company or to people in your office about how they keep on fighting with their wife or their girlfriend or their boyfriend or whatever, you're saying that they can't maintain a healthy relationship or a long-term relationship with anybody, right? So no goals, no relationships. They're living in the moment and only in the moment, right? They really just don't empathize or understand. They just really have no empathy. They don't care about you, right? They use their power over others to satisfy their own needs without considering how that will impact you, right? So they may move the goalpost and you may all of a sudden find that you have to do an 80-hour bender over the weekend, and there's not 80 hours in the weekend to get that project done, right? They don't care about you. They just want you to get the work done, right? They really don't. They also have a really big sense of self-importance. Oh, I'm always right, or I did this, or everybody must agree with me, right? So that kind of gets into that idea of that manager that is kind of more interested in themselves, but really needs to be the know-it-all, right? So there's another part of this, but with these kind of people, that know-it-allism really doesn't work. They're not interested in the nitty technical details. They just need to know that they're right and that everyone agrees with them that this is a direction or something we're going to go in. Now you kind of see this one too, an excessive sense of entitlement. Well, they hired me for $300,000, so I'm more important than you are because you only got hired for 120. Right. So you get that excessive sense of entitlement. They want that office. They want that door with their name on it. They want the corner office. They want all these things. And they will act really pompous in some ways to get it. It's almost comical in how they'll act at times. And the interesting part is that supervisors can be narcissistic without having all of these traits. So let's kind of dig into mine, right? So mine was when I was working as a consultant. And we had just gotten done with a company, and we turned over all of our data and everything else, and everything was fine. We did the proper technology, the proper crypto, the proper security on it. Now, one person noticed the box that we had at the at the company we did the work for didn't like the way we did it, so they called up the manager and complained. Now, this manager called me into their office for 3 hours and screamed and screamed and screamed and screamed and screamed and kept on going. And just kept on going. They were bellicose. They were belligerent. They were loud. They were swinging from the chandelier for all intents and purposes, right? And then finally, at the end of this, one, I'm tired because I haven't been yelled at for 3 hours straight ever in my entire life. And then he turns around at the end and says, okay, and let me know if there's anything else I can ever do to help you with your job. And that's it. That was the whole thing. So that was a really interesting thing because no empathy, no trying to get to the goal, just trying to scream because the customer didn't understand how we had done a thing and didn't understand why after they had decrypted it, all of their data was available to them and we would have walked them through it, right? No realistic goal, no healthy relationship here. You don't scream at someone for 3 hours straight. And I mean like really screaming, like as in like the office cleared out. There was no one in the office but me and this person, right? He was very self-important. Right, this and all the rest of it. Now, here's what was really interesting: is after that, I went and talked to a counselor, and they said, "Oh, wow, you need to stay away from them. Don't ever be in a room alone with them again." And so I wasn't, and I quit. Went on to a different company, and 5 years later, I'm in Arizona, and I'm doing my thing, doing my contracting thing, and I see him splashed on the television, and he had killed his whole family. Right, so he was capable of that, and he killed his whole family. He's now sitting in an Illinois jail for murder of his wife and his 3 kids. And if I hadn't listened to that counselor, right, who knew how he was going to escalate? But the reason why he killed his whole family was because he wanted to go live with a stripper in the woods in Canada. He wanted what he wanted, and he didn't care how he got there. And that's really kind of that kind of person, right? And again, it's a pretty big example of what ends up happening when you are with a person and your gut is like telling you, oh my God, I'm in danger, right? Really listen to your gut on this one because your body reactions are going to tell you how to do things. And I'm really kind of thankful now that I know that he's capable of doing that, that I was never in an office alone with this person again, because Lord knows what would have happened. So this is a really serious kind of thing, right? So when you come in here, you need to really set some boundaries if you can with this person, because if you're going to set boundaries with a narcissist, you need to be underneath hypervigilance, some kind of constant vigilance with here, because your narcissistic boss isn't going to care about your boundaries because they're your boundaries and he needs something from you or she needs something from you. They're not going to respect your personal space, your time, your needs, or anything else. They will call you in the middle of surgery and complain why you're not at work, literally, right? And I've had people's phones go off with people calling in from work and they've taken the day off so they can have surgery. They simply do not care. So when you try to do a boundary, they're just going to see this as a challenge, and then one that they need to break to prove that it's important here. So they're going to poke at it every honking day. They're going to, oh, can you give me 5 minutes after work today? I just need you to work a little bit later. I just need you to work a little bit later. And if you ever say yes, they've won. They will keep on pushing that boundary. If you give them 5 minutes, they'll take 10. If you give them 10, they'll take an hour. And it really is interesting because they will pull every single emotional trick in the book to give you those extra 5 minutes so they can break that boundary because you got to leave at 5 to go pick up your kid or go do something, right? That's also equally important or more important than work. The other thing I've seen too is they do use the divide and conquer. And this is actually a really common management trait. Well, Johnny said, or Bobby said, or Janie said, blah, 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 right? It's super common to play people off each other just to see what happens, right? And again, this isn't particular just to the self-absorbed or narcissistic boss. It's really more about how management will sometimes try to break up a really strong team, one that is going in a very good direction and doing what they need to do. But because they are so strong as a team, they can overshadow the manager, and the manager is not comfortable with that. Now, what's interesting is that this is really just a form of manipulation and based on comparison. And I've been in places, and I actually really just said, fine, at this point in my career, I can do this. I just find you can just say it, and I go, I'm out of here, right? I'm done. Now, I've actually had someone do this, and I've actually had someone do this in the middle of COVID, and I literally just said, fine, you can have my resignation on your desk this evening, and I did. So what ended up happening is we had an employee come in that was teaching a class, and he brought in a bunch of plagiarized material. The person was told not to use the material because they stole it from somebody, right? And this guy comes in and he starts teaching with this stolen material, and he's been told, and everyone's been told to watch for him bringing in all this stolen material. And because we don't want to take the risk, if someone reports us for that, then we're doomed, right? We're not going to get anywhere where we need to go. So the manager over both of us, because I'm like going, hey, we need to be going back to the original material because I know this is stolen. And I know that the director of education told me not to let this person use this kind of stuff. He just basically said, well, I'm going to let him still use the stolen material because they love him more than they love you. They feel like they're learning more from him than they feel that they can learn from you. And I'm like, I'm not going to play. I said, okay, fine. If they love him more than me, then you get what you want and you can have my resignation on your desk that evening. And I was gone 4 days later. And then what ended up happening with that person is that they ended up having to go back and backtrack because it was stolen material. And they ended up pulling that guy from and being in front of the class. He was no longer allowed to teach. So interestingly enough, right, that was a real big kind of thing. But that divide and conquer bit that the manager pulled because he didn't really care, he just wanted the job done, didn't mean that he was a narcissist, but it just meant that he just did a pretty standard kind of business technique. And people who are subject to this process really need to unite or be in a position where they can just do a sit-down strike or just resign, right? Because really, when you're comparing two employees against each other, that's not fair. That's not right. It's not a business skill that they teach. It's not anything that anyone should ever have to deal with at work because you're you and someone else is them. And you two are not alike in any way, shape, or form. You're both distinct, unique people with your own strengths and weaknesses. And to turn around and say, well, they love Bobby more than they love Billy is really poor just management, but it doesn't mean you're a narcissist. But a narcissist will use this every honking day to try to get underneath everyone's skin. Now, this one I love because wild mood swings, right? I mean, honestly, I've seen this in the office. You know, 1 minute they're like happy, laughing, and the next minute they are screaming and swinging from the light fixtures. And it's really interesting because you can just trigger it by saying, hey, how's your day going? Oh, my goodness, because you don't know who you're going to be dealing with day to day or sometimes even minute to minute. That can be insanely anxiety producing, right? You're walking on eggshells and every day can become problematic. And eventually, because you don't know who you're going to be dealing with day to day, you just kind of go into this little jello mold. You refuse to act. You don't do anything. You don't do anything without permission from the person because you really don't know who you're going to deal with today. And then company culture can feed this too, right? If you're in a bro culture, if you're in a winner take all kind of internal corporate structure, your self absorbed boss is going to thrive there because everyone is jockeying for power and position. And if you're just a normal person, it can be really painful working in a winner take all kind of environment. But when you take a look at banking and you take a look at some of these other kinds of industries that are like that, where you have a big driver for a very specific goal like profit, the military, right, isn't necessarily a good environment, but a bank is a perfect environment for these kinds of people. Honestly, it really is, just because it is a winner take all kind of internal corporate structure or a bro culture. Now, there are some coping mechanisms. There really are on this one, and they can kind of work on getting you to a point where you can kind of recover some of your own self-worth on this one, right? Because if you've been working for this kind of manager, they're just going to drag you down. They're not interested in you as a person. They're interested in you from what they can get from you. And the minute they can't get anything from you, you're done with them. So really just kind of understand that's the relationship, right? It's all about what they can get from you. Now, there's some coping mechanisms. Again, you can try to keep your cool, but they're going to instinctually almost know how to get underneath your skin. And they're going to argue. They're going to just push back. And the biggest one I've seen, interestingly enough, is to just go gray rock. Now, if you've ever not heard of gray rock, that is a really interesting technique to just kind of let this whole thing just wash over you, right? So there's black rock of no contact. There's gray rock of no reaction, right? So as much as you can, exert some kind of self-control, because again, the one thing they're trying to do is get under your skin and get you to react, right? And that's where gray rock and the techniques and technologies around gray rock can really kind of help you kind of just, at least for the moment, stay calm. You will need a place to vent after this, because they are going to escalate until they get and see some kind of glimmer of something that they want. And they really will. They absolutely will do this. So gray rock is a really interesting technique. Try not to engage their ego. That's like super hard, because what they're looking for is validation. You know, they're going to come in and say, hey, I had to fix this again. Why did I have to fix this again? Did you see what blah, 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 blah? And they'll keep on going. All right. Don't take on their work or their responsibilities, because they will shovel that stuff onto you so fast it'll make your head swim. They really will. All right. You're not responsible for what happens to them, even if they say they are. Right. It's just crazy. Right. They're going to blame you for everything. They're going to say you're responsible for this. Why didn't you do this? Blah, 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 blah. You made me feel bad. No, I didn't. You need to control yourself. Right. Honestly. Right. They need to learn to control their emotions. Again, sometimes it's like dealing with a toddler. It really is like dealing with a toddler on some of this stuff, right? You know, don't ever give out an ultimatum. If you don't treat me better, I'm going to quit. Well, you need to quit, because that ultimatum is really seen as a challenge. It really is. Oh, good. I can get them to quit. I'm going to get them to quit. And that's how I'm going to exert my power over them. And they will escalate and escalate and escalate until they see that 2-week notice on their desk. That's it. They will do this. So ultimatums can generally be problematic because they see it as a challenge. If you lose it at them, that opens up a whole new door of weirdness, because they're going to feel like you just got done attacking them, and they're going to escalate. And in their mind, any action is okay. Any action, anything is okay if they've been attacked by someone, especially someone that's junior to them. How dare you? Good person. And again, you can always recommend they get some therapy. That's kind of funny, because you see about 5 different reactions go across their face in under 3 seconds, right? But the therapy ain't going to work here. This isn't something you cure. There's no magic pill for this kind of person, right? And people are simply in it for themselves. They'll tell you anything that is convenient to get what they want. And again, when these people finally collapse, they will take as many people down with them. So you don't want to even be in the neighborhood when they finally go, right? I mean, honestly, you really don't. Right. Try to keep good boundaries, but remember, these are seen as a challenge, and so expect confrontation here, right? Especially if you set a challenge like, I need to leave work at 5. Oh, aren't you a team player, right? Kind of thing. If you're not going to change them, and you're not, right, eventually they will leave, or they'll get fired, right? But they're going to leave a trail of wreckage behind them. I've seen these kind of people actually kill companies or kill divisions, right? I've seen whole companies fail because of this kind of behavior. The problem is, the money's good when the money's good, but these kind of companies and these kind of divisions tend to collapse overnight once something bad happens, right? You're never going to beat them at their own game. These people are experts. All that is just trying to get a path to escalation, and that just leads to more problems. And then you can try to ignore them. Again, it's that gray rock issue, right? But they keep on escalating. They'll keep on pushing the buttons. They'll keep on trying to get you to do a thing. And that's the core of this whole process, is they want what they want. And it doesn't matter the cost. And that's really the issue here, right? And then the next best mechanism, the best mechanism, unfortunately on this one, is to leave. That really is you need to plan an exit strategy. And if it's making you feel sick, if it's making you feel ill, if it's making you feel unhappy, if it's doing anything to you that keeps you from being a happy, healthy, whole human being, it is really time to go, right? Work is a place that you spend a lot of time at, and there is absolutely zero reason to spend time with a manager that's like this. There's no reason to do it, right? For me personally, it would be better for me to be living on the street than to deal with this kind of manager, because this kind of manager, it was a never win. It's a never give. It's a always take. And therapy will help you. I mean, I've had to do some therapy because of that one manager that killed his whole family. And this is a no BS kind of thing. If you want to know who it was, just reach out to me during in Q&A and I'll tell you. But that's really kind of it. This is really, really, really a dangerous kind of boss to have. And you need to take care of yourself first. So the best mechanism is to go. All right, so sorry for the downer on this one, but this is really one of the worst kind of managers to work with. So I'll see you in the next lecture.